The capital city of Ethelgard did not sleep, for the simple reason that its inhabitants had conquered the concept of fatigue roughly 4,000 years ago. The city was a sprawling, vertical masterpiece of obsidian glass and silver spires that pierced the heavy, violet clouds of the planet Valithar Prime. Here, night was not a time of day. It was an architectural aesthetic. The twin suns were shielded by massive orbital rings that cast eternal twilight over the surface, allowing the Velithari dominion to live in the perpetual, elegant gloom they required. Milo Cade adjusted the collar of his dress uniform, which was itching his neck in 3 distinct places. He stood on a balcony overlooking the obsidian gardens, checking his reflection in a pane of dark glass. He looked exactly like what he was, a human xenolinguist trying very hard not to look terrified. He was 32 years old, possessed a master's degree in galactic dialectics from Stanford Orbital, and had been on Valithar for 6 months. In that time, he had learned 300 variations of the word darkness and 0 ways to feel comfortable around people who drank synthetic blood from crystal flutes. "You are doing fine," Milo told his reflection. "You are a cultural attaché. You are useful. You are not food." He turned back toward the grand hall behind him. The reception was in full swing. It was a diplomatic mixer intended to solidify the fragile trade alliance between the United Earth Coalition and the Velithar Dominion. Humans provided solar harvesting technology and agricultural exports. The Velithari provided advanced medical nanotechnology and hyperdrive plotting charts. It was a fair trade, assuming one could ignore the fact that the average Velithari citizen looked at a human the way a starving man looked at a sandwich wrapper, with mild annoyance that there was packaging in the way. Milo scanned the room, looking for his superior, Ambassador Halloway. Instead, his gaze snagged on the high dais at the far end of the room. The royal circle was present. They were terrifyingly beautiful, tall, pale, and moving with a fluid grace that made human movement look like machinery grinding its gears. In the center of the group sat the regent, but Milo's eyes were drawn to the figure standing slightly apart from the throne. Lady Sarilith Voss. Even among the genetically perfected nobility, she was an outlier. She wore a gown of shifting gray silk that seemed to smoke around her ankles. Her hair was stark white, a sharp contrast to the midnight tones favored by the court, and her eyes were a piercing bioluminescent red that signaled high royal blood. Milo had read her file. She was the last of the Voss line, a family known for ruthless military tactics and an odd, reclusive honor. Rumors said she had once engaged a fusion blade assassin in single combat while holding a conversation about poetry. She looked bored, dangerously bored. Milo quickly looked away before he could be accused of staring. Staring at a high noble was a Class 4 etiquette violation, punishable by a fine or a very stern lecture that felt like a psychic attack. A chime sounded on his wrist link. It was a priority text message from Ambassador Halloway. "Milo, the translation matrix for the treaty addendum is corrupted. I need the hard copy backup from the data vault immediately. The regent is getting impatient. Do not mess this up." Milo swallowed hard. The data vault was on the other side of the palace, through the labyrinthine corridors of the West Wing. He tapped a confirmation and hurried toward the side exit, his heart rate picking up. This was his chance. If he saved the negotiation, he could petition for a permanent post. He could prove that humans were not just useful daytime allies to be tolerated until the suns burned out, but essential partners. He stepped into the corridor, and the heavy doors slid shut, cutting off the hum of conversation. The silence was absolute. "Greetings. Cultural Attaché Cade," a voice chirped from the floor. Milo looked down. A small, spherical drone hovered at knee height. It was polished chrome with a single blue eye. "I am Protocol Unit 7 Gamma," the drone said. "I detect your heart rate is elevated. Are you intending to sprint? Sprinting is forbidden in the Royal Wing. It implies prey behavior." "I am in a hurry," Milo said, stepping around the drone. "I need to get to the data vault. Guide me." The drone zipped in front of him, blocking his path. "I would be delighted. However, your posture is atrocious. You are slouching. A Velithari noble would interpret this as a submission signal. Do you wish to submit?" "No," Milo said, straightening his spine. "I wish to deliver a document. Move." The drone spun happily. Excellent syntax. A little aggressive, but acceptable for a lower species. "Follow me." Milo followed the drone deeper into the palace. The architecture here was oppressive. The ceilings vaulted 50 feet high, lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with statues of faceless armored warriors. The air grew colder. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Milo asked after 10 minutes of twisting turns. The map on his link was scrambling. The heavy stone of the palace blocked the signal. "This is the most efficient route for a servant of your clearance," the drone replied. "We are bypassing the Gallery of Ancestors to avoid disturbing the meditation hours." Milo checked the time. He had 5 minutes before Holloway started panicking. "We need to go faster," Milo said. The drone halted abruptly at a junction of 3 identical corridors. "Calculating," the drone said. Its blue eye flickered. "There is a maintenance shortcut through the bioluminescence ward. It will save 3 minutes." "Take it," Milo said, wiping sweat from his forehead. The drone turned left, leading him down a hallway that was markedly different from the others. The floor here was not cold stone, but a warm, organic composite. The air smelled of ozone and crushed flowers. The lighting shifted from stark white to a deep, throbbing purple. "Warning," the drone said, its voice dropping a decibel. "We are approaching a restricted zone. Do not make eye contact with any sigils." "What does that even mean?" Milo muttered, clutching his data satchel. He was walking fast, his dress shoes clicking loudly on the floor. The drone zipped ahead, opening a set of heavy circular doors that hissed as they parted. "Through here," the drone said. "The data vault access is directly across the atrium." Milo rushed through the doors, his eyes fixed on the far wall where another door waited. He was halfway across the room before his brain registered 2 things simultaneously. First, this was not an atrium. It was a sanctuary. Second, he was not alone. The room was vast, dominated by a central pool of glowing silver liquid that swirled with magnetic currents. Floating above the pool were intricate rings of light, rotating in silence. And standing on the edge of the pool, bathed in the ascending mist of the regenerative fluid, was Lady Saralith Voss. She was undergoing the sunless rite. Milo knew of the rite only from textbooks. It was a biological necessity for the highborn, a period of extreme vulnerability where their cellular structure regenerated from the stress of their solar shielding. It required total exposure. Saralith was unclothed. The sight was not human. It was sculpted marble and terrifying power. Her skin was covered in glowing geometric patterns, bioluminescent veins that pulsed with the rhythm of the room. She was stark, terrifyingly beautiful, and completely unguarded. She froze. Milo froze. The drone froze. Time seemed to stretch into a painful infinity. Milo's brain misfired. He saw the shock register on her face, a widening of those red eyes, the sudden stiffening of her posture. He saw the realization hit her, not just of nudity, but of something far worse. The mist swirled around her knees. The silence was heavy enough to crush a starship. Milo realized he was staring. He realized he was breathing. He realized he had just walked into the one room in the entire galaxy that he was absolutely forbidden to enter. Panic, cold and sharp, seized his throat. He needed to apologize. He needed to explain. He needed to say something that would prevent the guards from disintegrating him on the spot. His mouth opened. His brain detached from his vocal cords. I accidentally saw a naked alien vampire girl and now I must marry her, right? The words hung in the air, absurd and horrifying. It was a nervous reflex, a piece of pop culture trivia from Earth that had bubbled up from his subconscious in the face of imminent death. Saralith's expression shifted. The shock evaporated, replaced by a fury so cold it lowered the room temperature. But beneath the rage, Milo saw a flicker of something else. Terror. She snatched a ceremonial robe from a floating tray and wrapped it around herself in a blur of motion too fast for Milo to track. "Get out!" she hissed, the sound resonating in his chest like a bass drum. The drone let out a shrill alarm. "Witness violation. Code Black, witness violation." The doors behind Milo slammed shut and sealed with a mechanical thud. Red lights began to flash along the ceiling. "Oh no," Milo whispered. Saralith stepped down from the dais, the silver water dripping from her feet. She did not look like a woman caught in a shower. She looked like a queen whose fortress had been breached. She pointed a trembling finger at him. "Do you have any idea what you have done, human?" Her voice was shaking, not with embarrassment, but with the weight of a collapsing mountain. "You have triggered the witness." "I didn't mean to," Milo stammered, backing up until he hit the sealed door. The drone. It took a shortcut. The drone was currently spinning in circles, emitting a high-pitched whine. Calculation error. Calculation error. Political instability imminent. The far doors blasted open. They did not just open, they were breached. A squad of the Royal Guard, clad in obsidian armor and wielding kinetic pikes, stormed into the room. Behind them strode three figures in long crimson vestments, the high justiciars of the blood priesthood. "Secure the witness," the lead justiciar roared. Two guards seized Milo by the arms. He didn't fight. He was too busy trying not to faint. They dragged him to his knees. Saralith stood tall, clutching the robe to her chest. Her eyes darted from Milo to the justiciars. She looked trapped. He saw nothing. Saralith lied. Her voice was steel. He entered a moment too late. The rite was concluded. The lead justiciar walked forward. He was an ancient creature, his skin like parchment paper stretched over a skull. He held up a censer wand and waved it through the air between Milo and Saralith. The tip glowed a violent, accusing red. "The ocular residue confirms connection," the justiciar rasped. He saw the marks of lineage. He saw the vulnerability. The law of witness is invoked. Milo looked up, his heart hammering against his rib. "What does that mean?" "I'm a diplomat. I have immunity." The justiciar looked down at him with zero sympathy. "Diplomatic immunity applies to laws of commerce and transit. Human. It does not apply to the blood law. You have seen a highborn in the sacred state of regeneration. You have seen the weakness that protects our strength." "So?" Milo asked, his voice cracking. "So," the justiciar continued, "you are now a liability to the security of the Voss bloodline. By the ancient statute, there are only two ways to ensure your silence." Milo looked at Saralith. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the floor, her jaw clenched tight. "Option 1, the justiciar said, drawing a long, slender blade from his belt. "We remove your eyes and your tongue, and then we terminate your biological functions to be certain." Milo's knees turned to water. "And option 2, he squeaked. The justiciar sheathed the blade with a click. You are bound to the Voss line. You become the legal guardian of her honor. You marry her. Milo blinked. He looked at Sarilith. She looked back at him, her expression a mix of loathing and resignation. That was a joke, Milo whispered. When I said it, I was joking. The universe, unfortunately, was devoid of a sense of humor. The great hall of judgment was cold, vast, and smelled faintly of copper. Milo stood on a raised platform in the center of the room, surrounded by tiers of stone benches occupied by the most powerful vampires in the galaxy. He had not been deported. He had not been given a phone call. He had been stripped of his comlink and marched directly into a nightmare. Ambassador Holloway was there, standing in the visitor's box, looking like he was about to have a stroke. He was arguing furiously with a Velithari official, his hands gesturing wildly. "This is insane," Milo heard Holloway shout. "He is a junior attaché. This is a simple trespassing charge. It is the law," the official shouted back. Milo looked to his left. Sarilith sat in a high-backed chair, fully dressed now in her armor-weave gown. She stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the hundreds of whispers rippling through the room. The High Minister of the court banged a heavy staff against the floor. Silence. The minister read from a holographic scroll that floated in the air. The wording was archaic, translated into Milo's ear by a universal translator that sounded bored, whereas the entity Milo Cade did intrude upon the sunless right. Whereas the Lady Sarilith Voss was exposed in the state of renewal. Whereas the security of the Voss genetic code has been compromised by alien observation. Milo felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. He began to understand the real danger. It wasn't just nudity. It was biology. The right revealed the specific genetic markers of her power, weaknesses that rival houses could exploit to assassinate her. By seeing her, Milo had become a living map of her vulnerabilities. "The priesthood speaks for execution," a voice boomed from the right. A severe-looking man in red robes stood up. "He is a human. He is short-lived and fragile. He cannot protect her honor. He is a security leak. Eliminate him and scrub the memory." Milo flinched. "Objection!" A woman's voice rang out from the left. Milo turned. It was a representative of the reformist bloc. She was younger, sharper. The Voss line is already under scrutiny for isolationism. Executing a diplomatic envoy for an accident caused by our own malfunctioning drones. It would mean war with Earth. It would prove we are savages. She gestured dramatically to Milo. "Look at him. He is harmless. Binding him to Lady Sarilith proves our benevolence. It integrates the human alliance into our very bloodlines. It is the perfect propaganda victory." Milo felt sick. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a debate topic. Sarilith stood up. The room went quiet. "I have a voice in this," she said. Her voice was calm, but Milo could hear the tension wire pulled tight beneath it. "Speak." "Lady Voss," the minister said. "I do not wish to be bound to a human," she said. "It is absurd." "Then you accept his execution?" the priest asked, smiling thinly. Sarilith hesitated. She looked at Milo. For a second, their eyes met. Milo saw the calculation. She hated this. She hated him for walking through that door. But she was not a murderer. And more than that, she saw the trap her rivals were setting. If she let them kill him, she looked weak, unable to handle a simple accident without bloodshed. If she married him, she became a joke. But a joke could survive, a corpse could not. "I invoke the custody bond," Sarilith said clearly. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Explain," the minister demanded. "The marriage trial takes 7 days to prepare," Sarilith said. "Until then." I claim him under the custody bond. He will remain in my personal quarters, under my watch. If he betrays my secrets, I will kill him myself. If he survives the week, we will submit to the judgment of the Union." The minister considered this. He looked at the angry priest, then at the hopeful reformist. "Agreed." The minister ruled, "The human Milo Cade is remanded to the custody of Lady Sarilith Voss. The betrothal will be assessed in 7 days." He banged the staff. "Court is adjourned." Milo was not put in a cell. He was put in a room that was nicer than his apartment on Earth, but it was definitely a prison. The door locked from the outside. The windows were shielded with energy fields. The furniture was made of dark, heavy wood that looked like it had grown out of the floor. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "Married," he muttered. "I'm going to be married to a space vampire because a drone wanted to save 3 minutes." The door slid open. Sarilith walked in. She didn't look at him. She walked to a small console on the wall and tapped a sequence of keys. The lights dimmed further. "Don't get comfortable," she said. "I'm really not," Milo said, standing up. "Look, Lady Voss." "Sarilith, I am so sorry. When I can sign an NDA. I can let you wipe my memory, then you don't have to do this." She turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "They want to kill you. Milo, the priesthood, the conservative houses. They want to kill you to embarrass me. They want to show that the Voss line cannot keep its sanctum secure." "So you saved me?" Milo asked. "I bought time," she corrected. "Do not mistake political maneuvering for kindness." She paced the room, her silk skirt swishing like water. "You are a complication I do not need. My family's position is precarious. We hold the keys to the southern star charts. There are factions that have been waiting for me to make a mistake." "And I'm the mistake," Milo said. "You are the avalanche caused by the pebble," she said. She stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked at him. She seemed baffled by his existence. "Why did you say it?" she asked. "Say what?" "The marriage line. In the chamber." Milo felt his face heat up. It was a panic. Pure panic. On Earth. In stories. That's usually how that trope goes. I didn't think it was an actual law. Sarilith stared at him for a long moment. And then, impossibly, the corner of her mouth twitched. "You humans are ridiculous." She turned back to the door. "Stay inside. Do not answer the door for anyone but me. The palace is not safe tonight." She left. The lock engaged with a heavy clank. Milo exhaled, collapsing back onto the bed. He was alive. That was the important part. He just had to survive 7 days of awkward roommate tension with a deadly alien aristocrat. And then the diplomats would sort this out. He closed his eyes. He woke up to the sound of a hiss. It wasn't the door. It was the ventilation grate in the ceiling. Milo sat up, groggy. The room was pitch black. He squinted at the ceiling. A small, dark shape was detaching itself from the vent. It dropped to the floor with zero sound. It was a figure clad in a skin-tight stealth suit. The face was covered by a smooth, featureless mask. Milo scrambled backward on the bed, his heart kick-starting into overdrive. "Who are you?" he whispered. The figure didn't answer. It raised a hand. In its grip was a needle-thin blade that glowed with a sickly green light. Poison. Milo looked at the door. It was locked. The assassin took a step forward. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a comedy. Milo grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the bedside table and held it up like a club. "Help!" he yelled, though the room was soundproofed. The assassin tilted its head, as if amused, and crouched to spring. The scandal hadn't been bad luck. Someone had opened the door for him. Someone had programmed the drone. And now, someone was here to make sure the wedding never happened. The assassin had lasted exactly 6 seconds. Milo Cade still replayed the moment whenever he closed his eyes. The figure in black had lunged. Milo had raised a candlestick with all the martial prowess of a frightened librarian, and then the door had disintegrated inward. Lady Saralith Voss had not entered the room so much as she had manifested within it, a blur of gray silk and kinetic violence. She had pinned the intruder to the wall with a hand around their throat, the sheer force cracking the obsidian paneling. There had been a snap, a slump, and then silence. Now, 24 hours later, the silence was still the loudest thing in the room. Milo sat on a stiff velvet divan in Saralith's private library, a stack of data slates balancing precariously on his knees. The room was a masterclass in intimidation, ceiling-high shelves filled with physical books bound in what looked suspiciously like reptile hide, a fireplace burning with cold blue flames, and Saralith herself, pacing by the window like a caged tiger. "We are not to leave this wing," Saralith said, her back to him. "The Royal Guard has doubled the perimeter." The assassin carried no identification, but their gear was high-grade stealth tech. That means money. That means a house. Milo adjusted his collar. He was wearing a new outfit provided by the palace staff, a high-collared tunic of midnight blue that felt more like a uniform than clothing. "So, we are prisoners?" he asked. Saralith turned. Her eyes were less glowing today, settled into a deep, smoldering crimson. "We are under protection," she corrected, "which, in Velithar, is simply imprisonment with better wine." Milo sighed and looked down at the data slates. Since the attack, he had been trying to understand the social landmine he had stepped on. He had downloaded 3 different etiquette manuals from the Human Embassy database, and they were currently waging war in his brain. "I am trying to figure out how to address you," Milo said, tapping the screen. "According to the Imperial Guide to Interspecies Decorum, I should call you Your Luminous Grace, but the handbook for thralls and servants suggests Mistress of the Eclipsed Heart. And honestly, that second one sounds like a bad romance novel." Saralith stopped pacing. She looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and faint amusement. "If you call me Mistress Milo, I will throw you off the balcony." "Right," Milo said. "Noted. Luminous Grace it is?" "Just Saralith," she said, walking over to the large obsidian desk that dominated the center of the room. "When we are alone, in public, you will say nothing unless spoken to. You will look at the floor. You will stand 3 paces behind my left shoulder." "3 paces," Milo muttered. "Not 2, not 4. 2 implies intimacy," Saralith said, her voice dry. 4 implies cowardice. 3 is the distance of a loyal guard dog. That is what you are now." Milo set the slates down. He felt a flash of irritation cut through his fear. "I am a diplomat. Saralith, I have a doctorate. I was negotiating trade tariffs on solar arrays before your drone decided to take me on a scenic tour. I am not a dog." Saralith froze. She looked at him, and for a moment, Milo thought he had crossed a line. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She moved toward him, not with vampire speed, but with a slow, deliberate grace that was somehow more threatening. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could smell the scent of ozone and crushed lilies that seemed to cling to her skin. "You are alive," she said softly. "Do you know why? Because I claimed you. Because I put my reputation between you and an executioner's blade. You are not a diplomat here. Milo, you are a scandal. You are a weakness I am forced to wear." Milo held her gaze. He was trembling, just a little, but he didn't look away. I didn't ask to be here, he said, and I certainly didn't ask to be married. Saralith's expression flickered. The anger drained away, leaving something tired and painfully young behind it. She looked away, toward the fire. It is not a marriage yet, she said. It is a trial, and if we want to survive it, you need to understand what you actually saw in that chamber. Milo blinked. I saw, you saw the right, she corrected, but you saw more than that. She walked back to the desk and tapped a console. A holographic projection of a double helix DNA strand appeared in the air, spinning slowly. It was complex, far more dense than human DNA, with glowing red markers along the chain. The Voss bloodline is old, Saralith said. We were the first to colonize the dark side of the planet. We adapted to the lack of solar radiation differently than the other houses. She pointed to a cluster of red markers. Most Velithari regenerate by absorbing ambient background radiation. It is slow, steady. My line, we evolved a mutation, the sanguis eterna. We do not just absorb energy, we amplify it. During the rite, my cells enter a state of hyperflux. I am not just healing, I am evolving. Milo squinted at the hologram. What does that mean in plain English? It means, Saralith said, turning to him, that my blood is potent enough to wake the dormant terraforming engines in the planet's core. It means that whoever controls my bloodline controls the energy grid of the entire Dominion. Milo felt the blood drain from his face. Oh, he whispered. The sunless rite is not just for hygiene. Milo, she said grimly. It is a containment procedure. If I am interrupted, if I am unstable, I could level a city block, and if a rival house learned exactly when my cycle occurs, they could capture me, drain me, and weaponize the result. Milo sat back, the gravity of his mistake crushing him. He hadn't just walked in on a girl in the shower, he had walked in on a nuclear launch code being reset. That is why the priesthood wants you dead, Saralith said. They fear the mutation. And that is why the reformists want us married. They want to dilute my bloodline with human DNA to make it safe, to make me controllable. Milo looked at her. She stood there, surrounded by ancient books and cold fire, looking incredibly lonely. She wasn't a monster. She was a battery that everyone was fighting over. So the accident, Milo said slowly. It wasn't just bad luck. Saralith shook her head. No. The drone was programmed to bring you there. Someone knew my cycle. Someone wanted you to see me. Why? To trigger the law, she said. To force a crisis. To either get you killed and start a war with Earth, or to force me into a marriage that would neutralize my political threat. It is a coup. Milo. And you are the spark. Milo looked at his hands. He thought about the drone, the cheerful little machine that had insisted on the shortcut. He thought about the assassin. I want to help, he said. Saralith laughed. A short, sharp sound. You want to help? You cannot even walk in these corridors without tripping over a statute of limitation. I can help investigate, Milo insisted. I am a linguist. I look for patterns in syntax. Code is just another language. If the drone was sabotaged, there will be a trace. Saralith studied him. For the first time, she didn't look at him like he was luggage. We have 6 days until the betrothal announcement, she said. If we can prove sabotage before then, we might be able to annul the witness claim. The investigation had to wait, however, because politics waited for no one. The next morning, the palace was thrown into chaos by the arrival of the UECS Horizon. a human heavy cruiser that parked itself in low orbit with very little subtlety. An hour later, a diplomatic shuttle slammed down on the landing pad, and Director Koval stormed out. Koval was nothing like Ambassador Holloway. Holloway was a career politician who liked buffets. Koval was a former military intelligence officer who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. He had gray crew-cut hair and a scar running through his left eyebrow. The meeting took place in the neutral ground of the Hall of Embassies. Milo sat at a metal table, feeling like a truant schoolboy. Sarilith stood in the shadows near the door, her presence a silent threat. Koval paced the room, his boots slamming against the floor. "Do you have any idea," Koval shouted, slamming a fist onto the table, "what the polling numbers look like back home?" "I haven't checked the news," Milo said. "They are saying we have surrendered," Koval roared. "The headlines are calling you a love slave to the vampire state. We have religious groups picketing the United Nations. We have trade partners threatening embargoes because they think we are sharing military secrets in exchange for whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at Milo. "It was an accident." "Director," Milo said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was misdirected. You were sloppy," Koval snapped. "You are a cultural attaché. Cade, your job is to smile, eat the weird food, and not create an interspecies incident that requires me to deploy a battle group." Koval leaned in, his face inches from Milo's. "Listen to me. The Joint Chiefs are terrified. They think this marriage is a soft annexation. They think once you are bound to her, the Velithari will claim legal jurisdiction over Earth's solar tech patents through spousal rights." "Can they do that?" Milo asked. Alarmed, Koval straightened up. "We do not know. Their legal code is 5,000 years old and written in blood metaphors. That is why this cannot happen." He looked over Milo's shoulder at Sarilith. "Lady Voss," Koval said, his voice hard. "The United Earth Coalition formally demands the release of our citizen." Sarilith stepped out of the shadows. She moved silently, but the air seemed to thicken. "Your citizen," she said coolly, "is currently the only thing preventing my execution by the priesthood, and I am the only thing preventing his. If I release him, he dies. If he leaves the palace, he dies. If you try to extract him by force, you violate the Treaty of the Twin Suns, and my fleet will vaporize your ship before you clear the atmosphere." Koval stared at her. He wasn't used to being threatened by someone wearing silk. "So he is a hostage." Koval spat. "He is a husband," Sarilith said. "Or he will be. Get used to the idea. Director. And tell your Joint Chiefs that if they want to keep their solar patents, they should pray I survive the week." She turned to Milo. "Come. We are leaving." Milo scrambled up, catching a look of pure disgust from Koval as he followed Sarilith out of the room. As the doors closed, he heard Koval shouting into his comlink. "They treated me like a pawn," Milo whispered as they walked down the long, empty corridor. "Yes," Sarilith said, "you are a pawn, but pawns can become queens if they reach the other side of the board." She glanced at him. "Did you notice his heartbeat?" "What?" "The director," Sarilith said. "When he threatened to extract you, his heartbeat did not elevate. He was lying. He has no intention of extracting you. He wants you to stay here as a spy. If you marry me, he gains a permanent listening post in the royal house." Milo felt a cold knot in his stomach. He wasn't being rescued. He was being repositioned. "How can you tell?" Milo asked. "The heartbeat thing." Sarilith stopped. They were in a quieter section of the palace, a gallery of suspended light sculptures. "It is a basic survival skill," she said. "Come here." She beckoned him closer. Milo stepped into her personal space. his heart doing a traitorous little flip. She reached out and placed two cool fingertips against the side of his neck, right over his pulse. The touch was electric. Milo stopped breathing. "Close your eyes," she whispered. He did. "Listen," she said. "Not with your ears. With your blood." Milo stood there, the scent of her overwhelming him. He felt the cool pressure of her fingers. "When a biological entity lies," she said softly, "the rhythm breaks. It is a tiny syncopation, a stutter. We call it the blood echo. It is the body rebelling against the mind's deception." She moved her hand, sliding her fingers down to his collarbone. Milo shivered. "You are terrified," she noted. "Your pulse is hammering like a trapped bird." "I am not terrified," Milo lied. "There," she said, her voice rich with amusement. "The echo. You lied." Milo opened his eyes. She was close, very close. Her red eyes were not scary now, they were deep, like looking into a nebula. "I wish I had that for office politics," Milo whispered. "It would save a lot of time in meetings." Saralith smiled, a real smile this time, small and fleeting. "It is a curse, Milo, to always hear the truth. You learn that most people lie to themselves more than they lie to others." She pulled her hand away, and the loss of contact felt like a physical weight. "Why do you think I am so reclusive?" she asked, turning to look at a sculpture of a fractured moon. "I walk through this court and I hear a symphony of treason. Everyone smiling, everyone bowing, and their hearts screaming for power. It is exhausting." Milo looked at her profile. He saw the fatigue etched around her eyes. "You hate it," he said. "Being feared." She stiffened slightly. "Better to be feared than to be food." "No," Milo said. "I saw you in the chamber. Before the anger, you were scared. Not because you were naked, but because you knew what they would do to you. You hate that they look at you and see a weapon instead of a person." Saralith turned back to him. Her gaze was intense, searching. "And what do you see?" Milo caved. Milo swallowed. He saw the way she held herself, like a shield wall. He saw the intelligence that terrified generals. He saw the woman who had stood between him and an assassin. "I see someone who is very lonely," he said honestly. "And I see someone who deserves a choice." The silence between them stretched, charged with something that wasn't fear and wasn't quite friendship. It was the confusing, magnetic pull of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing they might have to jump together. Saralith looked away first. "We should check the navigation logs," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Before we lose our nerve." The investigation led them deep into the palace substructure, to the server core that managed the automated systems. Saralith used her clearance to override the locks, and Milo used his linguistic skills to parse the code. It took 3 hours, sitting side by side on the cold metal floor, shoulders brushing. "Here," Milo said, pointing to a line of syntax on the screen. "See that? It is a redirect command. It wasn't a glitch. It was a manual override." He highlighted the timestamp. "It was input 2 minutes before I entered the corridor." Saralith leaned in, her hair brushing against his cheek. "Who authorized it?" Milo traced the command line back to its source. The user ID was encrypted, but the routing signature was distinct. "It came from the West Wing," Milo said. "The guest quarters." Saralith frowned. "The guest quarters are empty, except for—" She stopped, her eyes widened. "Except for the delegation from House Vex. My cousins, the rivals. If they hacked the drone," Saralith said, her voice cold, "then they are planning something for the betrothal announcement. They do not just want a scandal, they want a public execution. The day of the betrothal announcement arrived with the subtlety of a supernova. The grand corridor of the palace was lined with thousands of dignitaries, courtiers, and floating cameras that beamed the event to half the galaxy. Milo was dressed in ceremonial formal wear that was stiffer than a board, a long coat of white synthweave embroidered with silver thread. Sarilith wore a gown of deep crimson that looked like it was woven from fresh blood. They stood at the entrance of the corridor. The walk to the throne was 200 meters long. "Do not trip," Sarilith whispered. "I will try my best," Milo whispered back. They stepped forward. A trumpet blast shook the walls. The crowd watched in silence. Milo could feel the hostility rolling off them like heat waves. To the Velithari, he was a contaminant. To the humans watching on screens, he was a traitor. He reached out and took Sarilith's hand. It was a breach of protocol. They were supposed to walk side by side, not touching, but he needed the anchor. Sarilith glanced at him, surprised. She didn't pull away. Her fingers tightened around his. Her hand was cold, but her grip was solid. "Keep your head up," she murmured. "Let them see you are not afraid." "I am terrified," Milo whispered. "Then lie," she said. They walked 50 meters, 100 meters. The throne loomed ahead, the regent watching them with impassive eyes. Milo scanned the crowd. He saw the high priest who wanted him dead. He saw Director Koval looking grim. He saw a group of nobles from House Vex, smirking. Something felt wrong. Milo looked at the Vex delegation. One of them, a tall man with a jagged scar, was not looking at Sarilith. He was looking at the ceiling, directly above the center of the aisle. Milo followed his gaze. High above, nestled in the shadows of the vaulted arches, a maintenance drone was hovering. It wasn't a camera drone. It was too bulky, and it was dropping something. A silver glint. Milo didn't think. He didn't calculate. He just moved. "Sarilith!" He shoved her. It was a clumsy, desperate tackle that sent her sprawling sideways in a rustle of crimson silk. The object hit the floor exactly where she had been standing. It didn't explode. It shattered. A glass vial broke, and a cloud of golden dust erupted into the air. Milo, having thrown himself over Sarilith, took the brunt of it. The dust coated his back, his neck, his hands. For a second, nothing happened. Then the screaming started. It wasn't the crowd screaming, it was Milo. The pain was instantaneous and absolute. It felt like someone had poured liquid sunfire over his skin. The dust hissed as it made contact, eating through the fabric of his coat. "Sun toxin," someone shouted. "Seal the corridor!" Sarilith scrambled out from under him. She looked at the golden dust cloud, then at Milo, who was writhing on the floor, clawing at his burning skin, and her face went pale with horror. The toxin was designed for her. It was concentrated solar radiation in particulate form. For a vampire, it would have been instant, agonizing incineration. For a human, it was like being exposed to a reactor leak without a suit. "Milo!" Sarilith screamed. She didn't care about the protocol. She didn't care about the cameras. She fell to her knees and grabbed him. "Don't touch it!" Milo gasped, his vision swimming with white spots. "It burns." Sarilith ignored him. She ripped the burning coat off him, her own hands blistering slightly from contact with the dust. She scooped him up into her arms. He was heavy, awkward dead weight. But she lifted him as easily as if he were a child. "Clear the way!" she roared at the stunned crowd. Her voice was not human. It was a sonic weapon that shattered the nearest windows. She ran. She ran back down the aisle, carrying the human who had just saved her life. The image was burned into every camera lens in the room. the terrifying Lady Voss, clutching a broken human to her chest. Her face twisted not in rage, but in panic. It was a complete reversal of the chamber scene. There, she had been vulnerable, and he the intruder. Now, he was the broken one, and she was the protector. "Stay with me," she commanded, looking down at him as she sprinted toward the medical bay. "Do not dare close your eyes, Milo Cade. It hurts." Milo wheezed. "I know," she said, and her voice broke. "I know." Milo woke up floating in a tank of blue gel. He panicked for a second, thrashing, until he realized he could breathe the liquid. It was a Bacta tank. He looked down at his body. His skin was angry red, covered in patches of synthetic skin grafts. But the burning was gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache. He tapped on the glass. The fluid drained away, and the front of the tank slid open. Milo stumbled out, coughing, shivering in the cold air. A warm towel was wrapped around him instantly. "Careful," Saralith's voice said. "Your nerve endings are still regenerating." Milo blinked the gel out of his eyes. Saralith was sitting in a chair next to the tank. She was still wearing the ruined crimson dress, stained with soot and medical fluids. She looked like she hadn't moved in hours. Did I ruin the ceremony?" Milo asked, his voice raspy. Saralith let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Ruin it? Milo, you became a martyr." She stood up and walked over to him, adjusting the towel around his shoulders. Her hands were gentle, shaking slightly. "The toxin was a concentrated solar isotope," she explained. "It was meant to turn me into ash on live television. Because you are human. Your skin resisted the initial reaction just long enough. You saved me." She looked him in the eyes, her expression fierce. "The court is calling it the sacrifice of the Union. The reformists are spinning it as proof of your devotion. They say you threw yourself into the fire for me. They are calling it romantic fate." "And the assassin?" Milo asked. "Caught," Saralith said darkly. "He was a mercenary hired by House Vex. He talked before he died. We have the proof." Milo leaned against the tank, his legs weak. "So, we won?" Saralith looked down at her hands. "The pressure for the marriage is now absolute. The public loves you. Even the priesthood cannot demand the execution of a man who took a sun bullet for a highborn. The date is set for tomorrow." Milo closed his eyes. "So I'm trapped." Saralith reached out and took his hand. She squeezed it, hard. "No," she said. Milo looked at her. "I swore I would not bind you to me as a prisoner," Saralith said intensely. "And I meant it. If we do this, if we stand on that podium tomorrow, it will not be because the law demands it." She stepped closer, invading his space, her red eyes burning with a new kind of fire. "I am done playing by their rules. I am done being a victim of my own blood. You showed me that power can be used to protect, not just to dominate." She raised his hand and pressed it against her cheek. Her skin was cool, but her gaze was searing. "We will marry, Milo. But we will not be their puppets. We will use this union to tear their conspiracy apart. We will redefine what this bond means." She paused, her voice softening to a whisper. "But only if you choose it. I will not force you. If you want to go, I will put you on a ship tonight and threaten war until they let you leave." Milo looked at her. He saw the bruises of fatigue under her eyes. He saw the terrifying strength she held in check. He remembered the way she had looked at him in the library, lonely and fierce. He realized, with a jolt of panic and clarity, that he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to go back to writing reports on solar tariffs. He wanted to see what she would do next. He squeezed her hand back. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Besides, I think I look pretty good in ceremonial armor." Saralith smiled. It was a dangerous smile, sharp and full of teeth, but it was directed at the world, not at him. "Good," she said. "Then let us go and rewrite the law." Recovery involved a great deal of soup and a terrifying amount of supervision. Milo sat up in the biobed, nursing a bowl of nutrient-rich broth that tasted vaguely like salted cardboard. His skin still felt tight where the grafts had knit together, a map of pinkish islands across his chest and neck. But the burning agony of the sun toxin had faded to a dull, rhythmic itch. He was not alone. He was never alone anymore. Saralith sat in the corner of the medical suite, sharpening a long, curved dagger with a whetstone. Shk, shk, shk. The sound was rhythmic and oddly soothing, provided one ignored the fact that the weapon was capable of slicing through durasteel armor. "You are not eating the protein squares," Saralith observed without looking up from her blade. "They taste like despair," Milo replied. "They are efficient," she countered. "So is cement, but I don't eat that for breakfast either." Saralith stopped sharpening. She stood and walked over to the bed, her movements fluid and silent. She looked different these last 2 days. The heavy ceremonial gowns were gone, replaced by practical gear. A bodysuit of woven charcoal fabric, reinforced with leather at the joints, and heavy boots. She looked less like a princess and more like a predator preparing for a hunt. She reached out and adjusted the blanket over his knees. The gesture was small, almost domestic, but the intensity in her eyes was anything but. "You need your strength," she said quietly. "We leave in 1 hour." Milo put the spoon down. He knew the plan. While the capital was distracted by the preparations for the wedding and the media frenzy surrounding his heroic sacrifice, they were going to slip the leash. "Are you sure we can get out?" Milo asked. "The royal guard is parked outside the door like a fleet of statues." Saralith's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. "The royal guard watches for threats coming in." "Milo, they are far less vigilant about threats slipping out. Besides, I have called in a favor." The favor turned out to be a stealth corvette named the Silent Vow, piloted by a mute android that communicated entirely through blinking lights. They slipped out of the palace through a subterranean waste disposal tunnel that smelled truly horrific, boarded the ship in a hidden hangar, and punched through the atmosphere before the traffic control sensors could register their heat signature. Space was quiet. The Silent Vow hummed with a low, throbbing vibration as it engaged its cloaking field. Milo sat in the co-pilot seat, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. He felt a strange sense of vertigo, not from the acceleration, but from the sudden shift in reality. 3 days ago, he was a cultural attaché worried about table manners. Now, he was a fugitive fiancé on a stealth ship with a vampire. "We are approaching the free trade zone," Saralith announced from the pilot's chair. "Put this on." She tossed him a bundle of clothes. Milo unfolded them. It was a rough-spun tunic, grease-stained trousers, and a heavy jacket that looked like it had been worn by a mechanic who died in it. "Disguise?" Milo asked. "We are docking at Station Omen 6, Saralith said. "It is a border hub. If you walk in there looking like a diplomat, you will be robbed. If you walk in there looking like my betrothed, we will be swarmed by paparazzi drones. Tonight, you are a cargo hauler named Jace." "And you?" Milo asked. Saralith pulled a hood over her stark white hair and slid a pair of tinted goggles over her glowing red eyes. She adjusted her posture, slumping slightly, erasing the regal spine of a highborn. I am your hired muscle, she said, her voice dropping an octave into a rough growl. Do not speak to anyone unless necessary. Station Omen 6 was a neon-drenched nightmare orbiting a gas giant. It was a tangle of rusted docking arms, flashing holographic advertisements for synthetic gin, and the constant thumping bass of music that seemed to vibrate in the floor plating. They walked through the crowded bazaar, the air thick with the smell of ozone and fried spices. Milo kept his head down, clutching a datapad they had salvaged from the assassin's gear. The encryption had led them here, to a black market broker known as the Curator. They found the Curator's shop in a back alley that was illuminated only by flickering yellow bug zappers. The door was guarded by a massive alien with 4 arms and a very bad attitude. Saralith didn't even slow down. She walked up to the guard, whispered 3 words in a dialect Milo didn't recognize, and pressed a heavy credit chip into his lower left hand. The guard stepped aside. Inside, the shop was a clutter of illegal tech. Jars of preserved organs sat next to military-grade shield generators. Behind the counter sat a small, avian creature with spectacles perched on its beak. The Curator. We are closed. The Curator squawked, not looking up from a ledger. We are buying information, Saralith said. She placed the assassin's datapad on the counter. The Curator glanced at it, then froze. The feathers on his neck stood up. I do not touch House Vex business, he said, his voice trembling. That is a quick way to lose a beak. We know the assassin bought the sun toxin here, Saralith said, leaning in. Her voice was low, dangerous. We traced the isotope signature. It is rare. Only one broker in this sector deals in radiolytics of that purity. The Curator swallowed nervously. He looked at Milo, then back at Saralith. If I talk, they kill me. If you do not talk, Saralith said, letting a flash of red light bleed through her goggles, I will dismantle this shop, starting with you. The Birdman sighed, a whistling sound. Fine. It was a custom order. High priority, but the buyer was not House Vex directly. It was a proxy. A shell company. Show me, Milo said. The Curator tapped a few keys and a holographic receipt hovered in the air. Milo leaned in, his eyes scanning the data. Item. Solar particulate isotope. Quantity. 1 vial. Buyer. Obsidian 4 Holdings. Milo frowned. Obsidian 4? That sounds human. It is, the Curator confirmed. It is a holding company registered in the Earth Coalition. Specifically, a subsidiary of Terra Dynamics. Milo felt the floor drop out from under him. Terra Dynamics, he whispered. That is the corporate sponsor of my diplomatic mission. They paid for my ticket to Velithar. He scrolled further down the manifest. There were other purchases. Navigation override codes, security bypass keys, and one more file, labeled Project, Inciting Incident. Milo opened it. It was a dossier. It was a dossier on him. Subject, Milo Cade. Profile, high curiosity, low situational awareness, high moral drive. Predicted outcome, 99% probability of accidental intrusion if misdirected. Ideal catalyst for destabilization. Milo stared at his own face revolving in the hologram. They didn't just want a scandal, he said, his voice hollow. They picked me. They picked me because they knew I was clumsy. They knew I would get lost. They knew I would try to do the right thing and end up in trouble. Saralith looked at the screen, then at him. Her expression softened, the hard mask of the mercenary slipping. You were not a random victim, she said softly. You were a precision-guided munition, my own people, Milo said, my sponsor. They wanted this war. They wanted to break the alliance so they could swoop in and seize the tech during the chaos. He felt sick. He had spent the last week thinking he was an idiot who walked into the wrong room. Now he knew he was a rat in a maze that had been built specifically for him. "We need to go," Sarilith said abruptly. She grabbed the data chip and pulled Milo's arm. "Now." "Why?" "Because if they know we found this, the curator is not the only one in danger." As if on cue, a heavy thud shook the door. "Back way," the curator squeaked, diving behind the counter. They made it back to the silent vow by the skin of their teeth, sprinting through the maintenance shafts while heavy footsteps echoed behind them. Sarilith piloted the ship out of the docking bay with a maneuver that would have made a physics professor cry, spinning them into the dark void before the station's defense turrets could lock on. Once they were in deep space, engaging the hyperdrive, the silence returned. Milo sat in the mess hall, staring at a pouch of dehydrated fruit. He hadn't eaten. He couldn't. Sarilith walked in. She had removed the goggles and the hood. Her white hair was messy, static charged from the flight. She sat across from him. "Do not let it consume you," she said. "I was a setup," Milo said bitterly. "My entire career, my placement here, it was all a lie. I thought I was good at my job. I thought I was chosen because of my thesis on linguistics." "You are good at your job," Sarilith said firmly. "You decoded the navigation logs. You saved me from the toxin. You navigated the politics of a court that eats soft things for breakfast." She reached across the table. Her hand hovered over his, then settled on top of it. "They chose you because you are good. Milo, they just bet that you would also be weak. They were wrong about the second part." Milo looked up at her. The red of her eyes was deep, swirling like wine in a glass. The connection between them, the bond the court kept talking about, felt suddenly very real. It wasn't just a legal term, but it was a physical weight in the air. "Can I ask you something?" Milo asked. "Anything. The way you look at me sometimes, like you are hungry, but not in the vampire way." Sarilith froze. Her fingers tightened on his hand. She didn't pull away. She took a slow breath, and for the first time, Milo saw a flush of color rise in her pale cheeks. "We call it blood mirroring," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that barely cleared the hum of the engine. "What is that?" "My species. We are predators, Milo. We are built to hunt, to consume. But when we trust someone, when we truly trust them with our safety, as I have been forced to trust you, that predatory instinct gets confused." She looked down at their joined hands. The desire to protect and the desire to possess become the same thing. "My blood recognizes you as vital. And so, it amplifies everything. When you are near me, my senses spike. I can hear your heartbeat from 3 rooms away. I can smell the adrenaline in your sweat. It is overwhelming." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I look at you like I want to devour you because, in a way, I do. I want to pull you into the dark where nothing can ever hurt you again. It is terrifying." Milo sat there, his own heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He should have been scared. A vampire just told him she wanted to consume him. But he wasn't scared. He felt a pull, a magnetic drag in his chest that answered hers. "I am afraid too," he admitted. "Of me?" she asked. "Of losing myself." He said, "You are so much. You are centuries of history and power and beautiful, terrifying intensity. I am just Milo. I am afraid that if I let this happen, if I let myself want you, I will just be a footnote in your biography. The human pet." Sarilith stood up, She moved around the table, stopping beside his chair. She leaned down, her face inches from his. "You are not a footnote," she whispered. "You are the only person in 100 years who has looked at me and seen the woman, not the title. You are the only one who stood in front of the sun for me." She tilted her head. Her lips were very close to his. Milo could feel the cold radiance of her skin, contrasting with the heat rising in his own blood. The tension was a pulled rubber band, screaming to snap. He leaned in. She leaned in. Ding-dong! The ship's AI chirped brightly from the ceiling speakers. "Alert! Interspecies heart rate anomaly detected. Please remember that according to Safety Protocol 4 Alpha, prolonged eye contact combined with elevated pulse may lead to unintended bonding rituals. Would you like me to play some soothing jazz?" Milo jerked back, hitting his head on the wall behind him. Sarilith straightened up instantly, looking as if she wanted to murder the ceiling. "I am going to dismantle that computer," Sarilith hissed. Milo laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound, but it broke the tension. "Maybe later," he said, rubbing his head. "Right now, we have a dossier to use." The investigation led them to the graveyard sector. It was a region of space littered with the debris of the old wars, shattered hulls of starships, floating chunks of cities, and drifting weapon platforms. In the center of the debris field floated a massive Gothic structure made of black stone and iron, the cathedral of the First Knight. It was here, 5,000 years ago, that the blood laws were written. The silent vow docked at a crumbling airlock. Milo and Sarilith suited up in vacuum-sealed armor, Milo in a bulky human environment suit, Sarilith in a sleek, pressurized carapace that looked like a second skin. The interior of the cathedral was breathtaking and haunting. There was no gravity. They floated through the vast nave, drifting past statues of winged vampires that seemed to watch them with stone eyes. The only light came from the flashlights mounted on their shoulders, cutting through the eternal dust. "Why are we here?" Milo asked, his voice crackling over the comms. "The dossier proves the conspiracy. Isn't that enough?" "No," Sarilith replied. Her voice was clear in his ear. "The conspiracy proves they want a war. It does not stop the legal mechanism of the marriage. To stop that, we need to strike at the root." They reached the altar of records, a massive circular platform floating in the center of the apse. Sarilith anchored herself to the floor and began to interface with the ancient console. The language was archaic, a precursor to modern Velithari. "Can you read this?" Milo asked, floating beside her. "It is difficult," she muttered. "It is old high speech. The witness, the shield, the blood." "Wait," Milo said. He drifted closer, squinting at the glowing glyphs. "That symbol there, it doesn't mean prisoner." Sarilith looked where he pointed. "In modern Velithari, yes. But in this context, looking at the syntax, it means guardian." Milo finished. He was in his element now. Linguistics. He tapped the glyph. "Look at the root radical. It denotes choice. The law says, if a stranger witnesses the vulnerability, they shall be bound as a guardian to shield the blood from those who would exploit it." Sarilith's eyes widened behind her helmet visor. It wasn't a punishment, she realized. It was a protection pact. The right leaves us weak. The law was written to ensure that if someone saw a noble in that state, they were legally empowered to protect them until their power returned. "And look at the second clause," Milo said. Scrolling down, "This bond is forged in mutual consent, for a shield cannot be held by a hand that is forced." "Consent," Sarilith breathed. "The original law required the witness to agree to the role. The modern interpretation is a lie," Milo said, grinning inside his helmet. The priesthood twisted it. They turned a protection pact into a trap to control outsiders. We have them, Saralith said. With this record, we can challenge the High Court. We can prove the forced marriage is illegal by the very scripture they claim to uphold. She downloaded the data to her suit's drive. We have everything we need. We go back. Boom! An explosion rocked the cathedral. Milo was thrown backward, spinning in zero gravity until he slammed into a floating pew. Ambush! Saralith shouted. Red laser fire streaked through the dark nave. Figures emerged from the shadows of the upper balconies, soldiers in void armor, moving with magnetic boots. They bore the crest of House Vex. They followed us. Milo gasped, scrambling to find purchase on a pillar. Surrender the data, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Saralith looked at Milo. Get to the airlock, she commanded. What about you? I will buy you time. Go! She pushed off the altar, launching herself directly at the incoming fire. Milo didn't go. He anchored himself to the pillar and watched. He had seen Saralith angry. He had seen her strong. But he had never seen her unleashed. In the vacuum of the cathedral, without air resistance, she was a blur of violence. She didn't use a weapon. She used the environment. She ripped a stone gargoyle from its setting and hurled it with enough force to crush a soldier's chest plate. She moved in 3 dimensions, ricocheting off walls and ceilings, faster than the eye could track. But the soldiers were prepared. They fired nets of electrified plasma. They surrounded her. She was cornered near the stained glass window that looked out onto the stars. 5 of them leveled their rifles. Milo saw her hesitate. She was powerful, but she was flesh and blood. He looked at the ancient console next to him. He saw a lever marked with a warning glyph, gravity stabilization. Milo grabbed the lever and yanked it down. Gravity returned instantly. It wasn't gentle. It was 1G of force slamming down in a split second. The soldiers, who were mid-jump or relying on mag boots, were thrown off balance. They crashed to the floor. Saralith, however, reacted instantly. She landed in a crouch, and then she let go. She screamed, a sound that vibrated through the floor plates even in the thin atmosphere. A wave of red energy erupted from her body. It was the Sanguis Eterna, the power she had been hiding. The energy wave hit the soldiers like a physical wall, throwing them back against the stone masonry. It crackled with red lightning, illuminating the dark cathedral in a terrifying strobe effect. She stood in the center of the storm, glowing, her eyes burning like twin suns. She looked monstrous. She looked like a deity of destruction. The soldiers broke. They scrambled back, terrified by the display of raw, royal power. Saralith stood panting, the red energy fading. She turned slowly to look at Milo. She looked terrified. She waited for him to run. She waited for him to see the monster and flee. Milo stood up. His knees were shaking, but he walked toward her. That, he said, his voice trembling but clear, was incredibly loud. Saralith blinked, the glow in her eyes dimming to a manageable crimson. You are not running? I told you, Milo said, reaching her side. I'm not going anywhere. Besides, you missed one. He pointed to a soldier trying to crawl away. Saralith casually kicked the soldier's rifle away. We have the data, she said, her voice sounding exhausted. And we have the truth, Milo added. They limped back to the silent vow. Saralith was drained, the expenditure of energy leaving her pale and trembling. Milo helped her out of her suit and into the pilot's chair. He engaged the autopilot for the return trip to Velithar. The comms panel lit up like a festive tree. Incoming transmission, High Council. Incoming transmission, United Earth Embassy. Incoming transmission, House Vex's command. They know, Sarilith said, staring at the blinking lights. They know we have the evidence. Both sides, Milo said. The Earth government knows we have the proof of their corruption. The priesthood knows we have the proof of their lies. We are flying back into a trap, Sarilith said. No, Milo corrected, looking at the approaching planet. We are flying back into a negotiation, and for the first time, we have all the leverage. He looked at her. Are you ready to crash a wedding? Sarilith smiled, and despite her exhaustion, the sharpness was back. I believe, she said, that it is traditional for the bride to be late. But in this case, I think we should aim to be revolutionary. The return to the capital of Ethelgard was not a victory lap. It was a descent into a hornet's nest that had been kicked, shaken, and set on fire. The silent vow broke atmosphere under heavy escort. 2 Velithari destroyers flanked them, their hull lights pulsing a warning red. Below, the city was a grid of anxiety. The streets were jammed with protesters. From the view screen, Milo could see banners waving in the updraft of the ventilation towers. Some bore the crimson sigil of the priesthood, demanding purification. Others, the reformists, held glowing placards calling for the modernization of the blood law. Inside the cockpit, the silence between Milo and Sarilith was heavy, but it was a shared weight. They were no longer 2 strangers trapped in a misunderstanding. They were co-conspirators carrying a grenade into a courtroom. We have 20 minutes until we land, Sarilith said, checking the weapon system she had locked down. Once we touch the ground, we lose control of the narrative. The court will try to separate us. They won't be able to, Milo said. He was checking the data drive they had stolen from the cathedral. I am your witness, legally. I am the only thing standing between you and the executioner. If they separate us, they violate the very statute they are trying to enforce. Sarilith looked at him. Her eyes were tired, the bioluminescence dimmed to a soft ember, but her gaze was sharp. You have learned our laws well, she noted. I had a good teacher, Milo replied, and a terrifying crash course. They landed on the private pad of the Royal Spire. The reception committee was not Director Koval or a friendly face. It was a battalion of the Palace Guard, led by the High Justiciar himself. The wind whipped Milo's hair across his face as the ramp descended. The air smelled of ozone and impending doom. The High Justiciar, a man named Valerius whose face looked like it had been carved from granite and resentment, stepped forward. Lady Voss, Valerius intoned, his voice amplified by the collar of his robe. You have fled custody. You have engaged in unauthorized off-world travel. You have consorted with a foreign national in a manner that insults the dignity of the throne. I was investigating a treasonous conspiracy, Sarilith shot back, striding down the ramp with enough force to crack the pavement. And I found it. She held up the data drive. Valerius did not even blink. Seize the evidence, he commanded, and escort the human to the isolation wing. Milo stepped in front of Sarilith. It was an instinct now. I am invoking the covenant of the witness, Milo shouted. His voice cracked slightly, but he held his ground. Under the original text of the blood law, as recorded in the Cathedral of the First Night, the witness cannot be separated from the bonded until the trial is concluded. If you touch me, you break the law. Valerius paused. The guards hesitated. To break the ancient law in front of witnesses was a heresy even the High Justiciar could not commit lightly. Very well, Valerius sneered. Bring them both to the Grand Chamber. The Regent is waiting. The Grand Chamber was a cavernous hall of black marble and gold vein as it was packed. Every noble house, every trade guild, and every military faction was present. Floating cameras hovered like swarm flies, broadcasting the proceedings to the entire Dominion and, presumably, to a very nervous Earth. Milo stood beside Sarilith in the center of the room. He felt small. He was a human in a room of apex predators who regarded him as a political biohazard. The regent sat on the high throne. He was a figure of absolute stillness, his face masked in a veil of shimmering energy that obscured his features, a tradition for the interim ruler. "Present your defense," the regent said. His voice was not loud, but it seemed to originate from the walls themselves. Sarilith stepped forward. She slotted the data drive into the central projector, the air filled with holograms. The financial records of Obsidian Foe Holdings, the communication logs between House Vex and the assassin, the schematic of the sun toxin. "This was not an accident," Sarilith declared, her voice ringing clear. "My exposure in the right was engineered. House Vex conspired with a rogue faction of the human corporation Terra Dynamics to assassinate me. When the assassination failed, they pivoted to a political execution using the blood law." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Milo stepped up beside her. "And here," he said, pointing to the financial trail, "is the proof." The navigation drone that led me to the chamber was reprogrammed. The assassin was paid in untraceable credits that originated from a joint account held by these two factions. They wanted a war. They wanted to strip Lady Voss of her status and seize her bloodline's energy assets. The evidence was damning. The holograms spun in the air, undeniable. Then, Valerius laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound that cut through the room. A compelling fiction, the High Justiciar said. He walked into the center of the circle, ignoring the holograms. "You show us numbers. You show us data. But let us look at the reality." Valerius turned to the crowd, spreading his arms. "We see a young woman, isolated and ambitious, who has always chafed against the traditions of our people. And we see a human male, a linguist, a man trained in the art of manipulation." He spun on Milo. "You claim you were misdirected and you claim you are a victim. But is it not true, cultural attaché Cade, that you have a history of studying forbidden xenological texts? Is it not true that you petitioned for a transfer to Velethar specifically?" "That is standard diplomatic procedure," Milo argued. "Or," Valerius interrupted, "is it the calculated move of a man obsessed? A man who sought to seduce a highborn for his own elevation?" He pointed a long, bony finger at Sarilith. "And you claim this was a trap. Yet look at how you defend him. Look at how you fled with him. This is not a political conspiracy. Lady Voss, this is a sordid affair. You allowed him into that chamber. You staged the violation to force a marriage that would give you access to human technology and him access to Velethari power." "That is a lie!" Sarilith shouted, her hands clenching into fists. "Is it?" Valerius asked softly. He turned to the cameras. "Look at them. They do not stand as victim and protector. There they stand as lovers. The human is not a witness. He is a pet, a lovesick pawn she has ensnared to help her sell our secrets to the Earth Coalition." The crowd erupted. The narrative was shifting. The evidence didn't matter because Valerius was attacking their character. He was painting Milo not as a hero, but as a fool, and Sarilith not as a victim, but as a traitorous seductress. Director Koval, representing the humans, stood up in the gallery. "The United Earth Coalition does not condone this union," Koval shouted. "If this marriage proceeds, we will consider it a hostile act of assimilation. We will withdraw all solar assets," the reformists shouted back. "Let them marry." "It is progress," the priesthood chanted. "Purge the bloodline. Execute the human." The noise was deafening. The regent raised a hand, and the room fell silent instantly. "The evidence is complex," the regent said. "The trial of the blood law will conclude tomorrow at the festival of the twin suns. Until then, the accused are remanded to their quarters." The walk back to Saralith's wing was a march of defeat. The guards shoved them inside and sealed the heavy doors with a finality that echoed in the silence. Saralith walked straight to the balcony and gripped the railing. Her knuckles were white. The city below was a sea of lights. But to her, it must have looked like a cage. Milo stood by the fireplace, feeling the heat of the blue flames. He felt sick. Valerius had taken the truth and twisted it until it looked like filth. "They didn't believe us," Milo said quietly. "They did not want to believe us," Saralith replied, her voice tight. "The truth is inconvenient. A scandal is useful." She turned to face him. Her expression was hard, a mask of porcelain and ice. "You should go," she said. Milo blinked. "What?" "There is a transport leaving for the Outer Rim in 2 hours," she said. "I still have contacts in the smuggling guilds. I can get you out. The guards are focused on the perimeter, not the service lifts. Saralith, we are in the middle of a trial." "There is no trial. Milo," she snapped. "Did you not hear them? They have already written the verdict. If you stay, they will execute you to purify the stain. If you marry me, they will isolate us and strip mine my bloodline until we are husks." She walked over to him, her eyes burning. "You are the weakness they are exploiting. Valerius was right about one thing. You are a pawn. As long as you are here, they can use you to hurt me. So go. Leave. Save yourself." Milo looked at her. He heard the words, but he also heard the blood echo she had taught him to listen for. He heard the frantic, terrified rhythm of her heart. She wasn't sending him away because she didn't want him. She was sending him away because she couldn't bear to watch him die. "I am not leaving," Milo said. "Go!" she screamed, and she shoved him. It was a physical shove, hard enough to send him stumbling back against the desk. A vase of obsidian glass wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. "I do not want you here," Saralith yelled. Her composure cracked. The mask shattered. "I am tired of having to protect you. I am tired of being vulnerable because of you. You are just a human. You are fragile. You are a liability. Get out." Milo stood up. He brushed the glass shards from his sleeve. He looked at the door. He could go. He could walk out, find the smuggler, and be back on Earth in a week. He could go back to his apartment, his coffee, his safe, boring life where no one looked at him like he was a piece of meat or a political weapon. He walked to the door. Saralith turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking. Milo placed his hand on the handle. He turned it. The latch clicked. He thought about the first time he saw her, terrifying and beautiful in the mist. He thought about the way she had jumped in front of a laser blast for him. He thought about the loneliness he had seen in the library, the deep, aching isolation of a woman who had been a symbol her entire life, never a person. He realized that everyone in her life had either tried to use her or abandoned her when she became too dangerous. He let go of the handle. The latch clicked back into place. Saralith flinched at the sound. "I told you to go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," Milo said. He walked back across the room. He didn't stop at the safe distance of 3 paces. He walked until he was standing right behind her. "I am not going to be another person who leaves you. Saralith." She spun around, her face wet with tears that she refused to acknowledge. "Why?" she demanded. "Why are you so stubborn? Do you have a death wish?" "No," Milo said softly. I just have a very strong objection to letting the bad guys win. And I have a problem with leaving my partner behind. Partner? She scoffed, though the venom was gone, replaced by a desperate confusion. We are a political accident. We are more than that, Milo said. And you know it. He reached out. It was a gamble, a massive, terrifying gamble. He took her hand. Her skin was cold, but the moment his skin touched hers, he felt the jolt, the connection, the blood mirroring she had talked about. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was an emotional resonance. He felt her fear, her exhaustion, and beneath it all, a fierce, burning desire to be known. Sarilith stared at their joined hands. She looked up at him, her red eyes wide and searching. You could die, she whispered. I might, Milo admitted, but I would rather die standing next to you than live wondering what would have happened if I stayed. Sarilith let out a shuddering breath. The fight went out of her. She took a step forward, closing the distance. She didn't kiss him. It was something more intimate than that. She rested her forehead against his chest, right over his heart. Milo wrapped his arms around her. He held her, not as a diplomat holding a dignitary, but as a man holding the woman he loved. He felt her relax against him, the tension melting from her frame. She smelled of rain and ozone. I am so tired, Milo, she murmured into his tunic. I know, he said, resting his chin on her white hair. I've got you. They stood there for a long time, the silence of the room wrapping around them like a shield. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability, in a palace full of lies. This was the only true thing. Sarilith pulled back slightly, just enough to look at his face. Her hand came up to cup his jaw. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. There is something else, she said softly. Something I have not told you. Milo waited. The reason the priesthood hates me. The reason House Vex risked everything to expose me. It is not just because of the mutation. She took a deep breath. The Night Throne has been vacant for 10 years, she said. The regent is only a steward. The law states that the throne must go to the bloodline with the highest concentration of the progenitor's genetic markers. Milo's eyes widened. You said your mutation amplifies energy. Yes, she said. It is the marker. I am not just a noble. Milo, I am the heir. I am the legitimate contender for the Night Throne. If I complete the rite, if I survive the trial, I become the queen of the Dominion. Milo stared at her. The scale of the conspiracy suddenly snapped into focus. They weren't trying to cause a scandal to embarrass a duchess. They were trying to disqualify an empress. That is why they needed the marriage to look like a weakness. Milo realized. If you are married to a human, a short-lived, fragile outsider, they can argue you are compromised. That you cannot rule because your judgment is clouded by an inferior species. Yes, Sarilith said. And if I am executed, the line of succession falls to the next strongest house, House Vex. Milo guessed. Exactly. A chime sounded from the console on the wall. It was a priority summons. The regent requests the presence of the betrothed in the private study. Sarilith stiffened. She looked at Milo. The regent, she said. He has been silent this whole time. Let's go see what he wants, Milo said, taking her hand again. And let's not let go this time. The regent's private study was surprisingly small. It was a circular room at the very top of the spire, lined with windows that offered a 360-degree view of the planet. The regent stood by the window, his back to them. The shimmering energy field that usually masked his face was gone. He was an old man, his skin gray and cracked like dry earth, his eyes milky white. Leave us, the regent commanded the guards. The doors closed. You presented a strong case today, the regent said, not turning around. The evidence was irrefutable. Then why did you not dismiss the charges? Sarilith asked, her voice cold. Because the truth is irrelevant to the mob, the regent said. He turned to face them. He looked tired, ancient. You think House Vex acted alone? The regent asked. You think a single noble house could compromise the palace navigation AI without detection? Milo felt a chill run down his spine. You authorized it, Milo said. The regent nodded slowly. I did. Sarilith took a step forward, her hands glowing with faint red energy. You betrayed your own throne? I tested it, the regent corrected. I needed to know if you were ready. You are the heir, Sarilith, but you are wild. You are reckless. I needed to know if you could handle a crisis. I needed to know if your mutation made you unstable. And the assassin? Milo asked. Did you authorize that too? No, the regent said. That was Vex overstepping. They saw the opportunity I created and tried to turn it into a coup. I did not intend for you to die, child. I intended for you to be humbled. He walked over to a table and poured a glass of dark liquid. But now, the situation has evolved. The humans are threatening war. The priesthood is threatening civil unrest. We need a solution that stabilizes the realm. He held the glass out to Sarilith. I offer you a bargain. Sarilith didn't take the glass. Speak. You will marry the human tomorrow, the regent said. But it will not be a love match. It will be a containment treaty. You will withdraw your claim to the Night Throne. You will retire to your ancestral estates. You will live in peace, protected by my guard. The human will remain by your side, a symbol of the alliance. But you will have no political power. And if I refuse, Sarilith asked. Then the trial continues, the regent said. Valerius will demand a duel of honor, and given the current sentiment, I cannot guarantee the outcome. You might win the duel, but you will lose the people. They will see you as a tyrant who slaughtered a priest. Milo looked at the regent. He saw the calculation. The regent didn't want Sarilith dead, but he didn't want her on the throne either. He wanted the status quo. He wanted to remain in power while Sarilith faded into obscurity, a gilded prisoner of her own marriage. It is a leash, Milo said. It is survival, the regent countered. Take the deal. Marry him. Be happy. Let the throne pass to someone who knows how to play the game without breaking the board. The regent placed the glass on the table. You have until dawn to decide. They returned to their quarters in silence. The offer hung in the air like smoke. It was a way out. They could live. They could be together. No more assassins. No more politics. Just a quiet life on a country estate, watching the twin suns set. Milo sat on the edge of the bed. Sarilith paced. It sounds nice, Milo said tentatively. Being safe. Sarilith stopped. She looked at him. It is a cage, Milo. A comfortable one, but a cage. If I take that deal, I validate everything Valerius said. I admit that I am weak. I admit that my relationship with you is a liability that disqualifies me from ruling. And House Vex wins. Milo added. They get the throne eventually. And the corruption continues. Sarilith said. The smuggling. The weaponization of my people's biology. If I walk away, I abandon them to that future. She sat down next to him. But I cannot ask you to fight this. Milo. The alternative is the festival, the broadcast. If we refuse the deal, we have to go out there tomorrow and face the entire empire. Milo thought about Director Koval. He thought about the navigation drone. He thought about the regent, sitting in his tower, manipulating lives like chess pieces. He looked at Sarilith. He saw the fire in her eyes. She wasn't made for a quiet life in the country. She was made to burn. "If we take the deal," Milo said, "we are safe, but we are separate. I become your keeper. You become my ward. That isn't a marriage. That's a sentence." He took her hand again. "I don't want a leash. Sarilith, I want the truth." Sarilith squeezed his hand. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Then we decline the offer," she said. "How?" Milo asked. "We can't just say no. The regent controls the court." "We don't say it to the regent," Sarilith said. "We say it to everyone." She stood up and walked to the holographic projector in the corner of the room. She began to manipulate the controls. The Festival of the Twin Suns is the only time the palace communication grid is linked directly to every public screen in the city. For the betrothal ceremony. "You want to hijack the broadcast?" Milo asked. Standing up. "I want to turn the ceremony into an indictment," Sarilith said. "We have the data from the cathedral. We have the proof of the regent's complicity. He admitted it to us. We don't have a recording, but we have the logs of the AI update authorized by his code. If we do this," Milo said, realizing the magnitude of the plan, "there is no going back. If we fail, we die, and if we succeed," Sarilith said, looking at him with fierce pride, "we change everything." She held out her hand to him. "Are you with me?" Milo Cade. Milo looked at her hand. He looked at the woman who had terrified him a week ago, who now felt like the other half of his own soul. "Always," he said. He took her hand. "Let's go start a revolution." The Festival of the Twin Suns was not a celebration. It was a beautiful, terrifying masquerade draped over a city holding its breath. The capital of Ethelgard had transformed. The usual gloom of the architecture was broken by thousands of floating obsidian lanterns, each one burning with a cold, chemical blue flame. They drifted between the spires like a river of ghost lights, casting long, dancing shadows against the heavy clouds. Above, the sky was a traffic jam of power. Starships from every noble house and allied system hung in low orbit, their running lights blinking in a synchronized rhythm that matched the blood music throbbing through the streets, a deep, resonant bass that vibrated in the marrow of one's bones. Milo Cade stood in the waiting antechamber of the Grand Court, trying to breathe. He was no longer wearing the ill-fitting diplomat's tunic or the borrowed mechanic's grease-stained fatigues. He was encased in ceremonial dusk armor. It was a masterpiece of Velithari craftsmanship. Plates of matte gray alloy that articulated silently with his movements, etched with silver filigree that told the history of the Voss bloodline. It was light, but it felt heavy with implication. It was armor meant for a prince consort, or a sacrificial lamb. He looked at Sarilith. She was terrifying. She wore a gown of living midnight silk. It was not merely fabric, it was a biosynthetic organism that responded to her autonomic nervous system. When she was calm, it draped like water. When her heart rate spiked, the fabric tightened and hardened, shimmering with the iridescent sheen of oil on pavement. Right now, it was rippling with a low-level agitation turning the color of a bruised sky. Her white hair was braided with silver wire, and her eyes were burning with a steady, lethal crimson. "Do not faint," Sarilith said, her voice low. "It would be a poor start to the revolution." "I am not going to faint," Milo replied, adjusting the gorget at his throat. "I am just regretting skipping the cardio training at the embassy." He looked at her. Really looked at her. "You look like a war," he said softly. Sarilith turned to him. The silk of her dress shifted, darkening to absolute black at his compliment. "Tonight is a war." "Milo," We are just fighting it with words instead of fusion blades. For now. The heavy doors groaned open. The roar of the crowd washed over them, a physical wall of sound. It is time, the herald announced. Milo held out his arm. Sarilith took it. Her grip was iron hard. They walked out onto the grand dais. The scale of the audience was staggering. The amphitheater was a bowl of carved stone that seated 100,000 citizens, and every seat was filled. Beyond them, holographic screens the size of skyscrapers broadcast the image to the entire hemisphere. The regent sat on the high throne to their left, his face impassive. The high justiciar Valerius stood at the altar, looking like a vulture anticipating a meal. They walked the long obsidian path to the center of the stage. Milo could feel the hostility radiating from the priesthood section, a block of crimson robes seething with silent judgment. He could feel the anxious energy of the reformists. They reached the altar. Valerius stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. The crowd quieted, the blood music fading to a menacing hum. "We gather under the gaze of the twin suns," Valerius intoned, his voice amplified across the city, "to witness the binding of House Voss to the human coalition. We gather to seal the breach of the blood law." He looked down at Milo with undisguised contempt. "Milo Cade, you stand accused of witnessing the vulnerability. You stand bound by the ancient statutes to offer your life as a shield for the honor you compromised. Do you accept this burden?" This was the script. Milo was supposed to say, "I accept." He was supposed to bow, take the vow, and step into the gilded cage the regent had built for them. Milo looked at the microphone floating in front of him. He looked at the camera drone hovering at eye level. He looked at Sarilith, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Milo stepped forward. "I do not," he said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of 100,000 people simultaneously stopping their hearts. Valerius blinked. The script had broken. "You refuse?" Valerius hissed. "Then you choose execution." "No," Milo said, his voice gaining strength. He projected the confident lecture hall tone he used when explaining complex linguistic theory to bored undergraduates. "I refuse the premise of your question, High Justiciar, because the law you are quoting is a mistranslation." He walked around the altar, addressing the crowd directly. "I am a linguist. My job is to understand how words shape reality. You have been told that the blood law is a punishment. You have been told that because I saw Lady Voss in her regenerative state, I stole her power, and now I must pay for it with my freedom." He pointed to the priesthood. "But that is a lie born of fear. The word used in the ancient codex is not penalty. It is covenant. The law was not written to punish the witness. It was written to empower them. It was written to protect the highborn from the very people sitting in this box." He gestured violently toward the noble boxes where House Vex sat. Valerius stepped forward, his face twisting. "Cut his audio." But Sarilith moved faster. She stomped her foot, and a pulse of red energy surged through the floor, overriding the control console. The screens above the stadium flickered and changed. The financial records they had stolen appeared. The logs of the navigation drone, the schematic of the sun toxin. "You call this a marriage of honor?" Milo shouted, his voice echoing off the spires. "But look at the screens. This was not an accident. It was a transaction." The crowd gasped as they saw the logos of House Vex intertwined with the human corporation Obsidian Fur. "We have proof," Milo continued, pointing at the shaking justiciar. "The accident was engineered by House Vex and human war profiteers. They wanted to expose Lady Voss not to marry her, but to disqualify her from the Night Throne. They tried to kill her with sun toxin, and when that failed, They tried to bury her with this sham marriage. Saralith stepped up beside him. Her dress was swirling with violent patterns of crimson and violet. "They fear us," she declared, her voice ringing with royal authority. "They do not fear that I am weak. They fear that I am strong, and they fear that a union between our species, if chosen freely, would end their monopoly on power." The stadium erupted. It was chaos. The priesthood screamed for silence. The reformists screamed for justice. In the Vex box, the scar-faced noble stood up and signaled, "Kill them," he roared. "Restore the honor." The coup began instantly. Soldiers wearing the livery of the royal guard suddenly turned on their comrades. Half the security force leveled their weapons at the dais. The other half, loyal to the regent or perhaps just confused, hesitated. "Get down!" Saralith screamed. She tackled Milo just as a bolt of plasma scorched the air where his head had been. The dais dissolved into a firefight. Red and blue energy bolts crisscrossed the air like angry hornets. The crowd panicked, stampeding toward the exits. "We need to move!" Saralith yelled, pulling Milo to his feet. They sprinted toward the rear of the stage, dodging behind stone pillars as masonry exploded around them. A squad of Vex commandos jumped from the lower balcony, engaging the loyalist guards in hand-to-hand combat. Milo fumbled for the sidearm Saralith had given him, a heavy kinetic pistol he barely knew how to aim. "Aim for the center of mass," Saralith shouted, blasting a commando backward with a wave of telekinetic force. "I am trying," Milo yelled back, ducking under a swinging energy pike. "But if I die here, I want it noted on my tombstone that restore the honor is grammatically redundant. You can just say restore honor." Saralith let out a short, sharp laugh as she shattered a commando's helmet with her elbow. "You are impossible." They reached the service lift, but it was disabled. The panel sparked dead. "The sky bridge," Saralith commanded, pointing upward. They ran up the spiraling stairs of the central tower, emerging onto one of the slender architectural bridges that connected the Grand Court to the Cathedral of Laws. It was a ribbon of glass and steel suspended 2,000 feet above the city. The wind was ferocious here, whipping Saralith's dress into a frenzy. They were halfway across when a Vex gunship rose from the depths of the city canyons, its searchlights pinning them against the night. "Target locked," a mechanical voice boomed. Milo looked at the gunship. He looked at the drop. He looked at Saralith. "Jump," he suggested weakly. "Run," she corrected. They sprinted. The gunship opened fire. The bridge shattered behind them, glass exploding into diamond dust. They were running on a disintegrating path, the ground disappearing beneath their heels with every step. They leaped the final gap just as the center span of the bridge collapsed, falling silently into the dark city below. They rolled onto the terrace of the cathedral, gasping for air. Milo's armor was scorched. Saralith's dress was torn, the living fabric trying to knit itself back together. Before they could stand, the doors of the cathedral burst open. It wasn't guards. It was Valerius and a dozen of his elite blood priests. They blocked the entrance, wielding ceremonial staves that crackled with dark energy. "It ends here. Heretics." Valerius spat. "You have desecrated the ceremony." Saralith stood up. She was breathing hard, but she didn't look defeated. She looked furious. Milo stood beside her. He raised his pistol, though his hand was shaking. "You are right, High Justiciar," Milo said. "The ceremony is over, but the marriage isn't." Valerius laughed. "There is no marriage. There is only a corpse and a traitor." Saralith looked at Milo. She ignored the priests. She ignored the gunship circling back around for another pass. "Milo," she said. Her voice was steady, cutting through the noise of the sirens and the screaming city. She took his hand. "In the eyes of the old law," she said, The bond is not formed by the priesthood. It is formed by the witness and the highborn. It is a pact of mutual survival. She turned to face him fully, putting her back to the armed priests. I do not choose you because I have to, she said. I do not choose you because of politics, or scandals, or treaties. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing the soot from his cheek. I choose you because you are the only one who runs toward the fire. I choose you, Milo Cade. Milo felt the world narrow down to just her. The warships, the coup, the shouting priests. It all faded into background noise. I choose you, Saralith Voss, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I choose the danger. I choose the trouble. I choose you. A pulse of light, pure and blindingly white, erupted from Saralith's skin. It wasn't a weapon. It was the biological reaction to the completed bond, the blood mirroring locking into place. It washed over Milo, warm and humming with power. The priests flinched back, shielding their eyes. Valerius shrieked, "Abomination! Kill them!" Saralith turned. She didn't scream. She simply thrust her hand forward. The energy she had built up from the bond didn't explode. It expanded. A shockwave of pure force slammed into the priests, lifting them off their feet and pinning them against the heavy oak doors. We are leaving, Saralith said calmly. She grabbed Milo's hand and they ran past the stunned priests, deeper into the cathedral. The corridors of the cathedral were a maze of shadows and ancient stone. They could hear the sounds of battle echoing from the courtyard. The loyalist guards were fighting back against the Vex coup. We need the codex, Milo panted as they rounded a corner. The digital copy wasn't enough. Valerius called it a fake. We need the physical scroll from the vault. The vault is in the sublevels, Saralith said. Protected by the Founder's ward. Only a direct descendant can open it. And a witness, Milo added, remembering the translation. The law says the blood opens the door, but the witness holds the key. They reached the spiral stairs leading down. The air grew colder, smelling of dry paper and centuries of silence. They reached the bottom. The vault door was a massive slab of obsidian, etched with glowing red veins. There was no handle, only 2 indentations, one for a hand, one for an eye. Saralith placed her hand on the panel. The veins pulsed, recognizing her DNA. Bloodline confirmed. A disembodied voice whispered, awaiting witness verification. Milo stepped up. He placed his hand on the second panel. Witness confirmed. State your intent. Milo took a breath. We seek the truth, he said clearly, to protect the living from the dead. The door hissed. The obsidian dissolved into mist, allowing them to pass. Inside, the room was small and humble. No gold, no jewels. Just a single plinth holding a scroll made of preserved skin encased in stasis glass. The original codex. Saralith walked toward it slowly. She looked at Milo. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them both shaking. She leaned against the plinth, her forehead resting on the cool glass. I was so afraid, she whispered. Of the gunship? Milo asked, holstering his pistol. No, she said. Of you. She turned to him. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable in a way the cameras never saw. I have spent my life building walls. Milo? I told myself that love was a weakness. That attachment was a crack in the armor where the knife goes in. I feared love more than I feared sunlight. Sunlight only kills the body. Love. Love makes you feel mortal. It makes you terrified of loss. She reached out and took his hand, pressing it against her chest. He could feel her heart beating, fast, strong, alive. When you stood up on that stage. When you refused to run on the bridge. I realized that I would rather be mortal with you than immortal and alone. Milo looked at her. He saw the centuries of loneliness dissolving in the red light of her eyes. I didn't fall for the princess. Seralith, he said softly. I didn't fall for the vampire. I fell for the person I met in the quiet moments. In the spaces between the danger. I fell for the woman who puts soup in front of me when I'm injured and threatens to dismantle robots for interrupting a moment. He kissed her knuckles. We are mortal, he said. That just means we have to make it count. Seralith let out a laugh that sounded like a sob. She pulled him close, kissing him fierce and hard. It tasted of smoke and ozone, an absolute, terrifying promise. Then let us make it count, she said against his lips. She smashed the stasis glass with the hilt of her dagger. She grabbed the scroll. It was heavy, ancient. We have the proof, she said. The building shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Orbital bombardment imminent. The automated system warned. Shield integrity at 40%. They ran back up the stairs, bursting out onto the upper terrace. The sky was on fire. The Vex fleet had engaged the Loyalist ships. Debris was raining down on the city like meteors. But more terrifying were the 3 massive destroyers descending through the clouds, their cannons glowing with charging energy. They are targeting the palace, Seralith realized. They are going to level the entire district to bury the truth. Milo looked at the scroll in her hand. Then he looked at the comms tower on the adjacent spire. We can't stop the ships, Milo said. But we can stop the lie. If we get that scroll to the broadcast tower, we can override the jamming. We can show the original law to every soldier, every captain, every citizen. If we go out there, Seralith said, looking at the chaos, we are targets. We are already targets, Milo said. He checked his pistol. It had 2 shots left. He looked at her and grinned, a crooked, terrified, exhilarating smile. Besides, I'm technically your husband now. I think reckless endangerment is part of the vows. Seralith smiled back. It was the smile of a queen who had finally found her king. Then let us go. Husband, she said. She grabbed him, unfurled the midnight silk of her dress like wings, and together they leaped from the balcony, plunging into the burning sky toward the tower, carrying the truth that would either save their world or become their epitaph. The broadcast tower was a needle of chrome piercing the smoke-choked sky, and when Milo Cade plugged the ancient codex into the primary uplink, the effect was instant. The jamming frequency shattered. The truth did not trickle out. It flooded. Across the capital, giant holographic screens that had been broadcasting the Regent's seal flickered and changed. They displayed the scanned parchment of the codex, the ink 5,000 years old but the syntax undeniable. Alongside it played the navigational logs, the financial transfers between House Vex and the human weapons manufacturers, and the chemical breakdown of the sun toxin. The firing in the streets stopped. It was a surreal, staggering pause, soldiers lowering rifles, Vex commandos freezing as their own encrypted orders were laid bare for the galaxy to see. Above the clouds, the 3 destroyers held their position, their cannons glowing with unreleased fire. The Regent's voice boomed over the citywide address system, sounding weary but absolute. Cease fire. The tribunal will reconvene. The evidence has been authenticated. The Grand Court was a ruin. The stained glass lay in drifts of colored dust. The obsidian pews were scorched by plasma fire. But the people were there. The seats were packed not just with nobles now, but with citizens who had forced their way in past the confused guards. Millions more watched via the feeds. Milo stood in the center of the ash-strewn floor. His armor was dented, his face smeared with soot, and he was trembling with an exhaustion that went down to his bones. Beside him stood Seralith. Her living dress was torn, exposing the pale, unbreakable skin beneath. and she held the physical codex in her hand like a weapon. Opposite them stood High Justiciar Valerius. He looked diminished, stripped of his pomp, surrounded by the nervous remnants of the priesthood. In the gallery, the vexed nobles looked like trapped rats, whispering furiously among themselves. Sarilith raised the scroll. "The law is clear," she announced, her voice not needing amplification to reach the back rows. The blood law was written to protect the vulnerable, not to enslave them. It is a covenant of choice. By forcing a marriage to seize power, you have not upheld tradition. You have committed heresy against the founders. She slammed the scroll onto the lectern. I challenge the interpretation of this court. I challenge the legitimacy of the Regency's silence, and I challenge the honor of House Vex. The crowd roared, a mixture of outrage and vindication. The regent leaned forward on his throne. The energy veil was gone. He looked like a man who had gambled everything on a test and was now watching the results come in. "The challenge is heard," the regent said. Cultural attaché Cade. "You are the witness. You are the pivot upon which this history turns. Speak." Milo stepped forward. He felt the eyes of two civilizations on him. He saw Director Koval in the human delegation box, looking pale and sick as the conspiracy unraveled. He took a breath. He didn't use the high, formal court speech he had practiced. He used his own voice, hoarse, human, and honest. "I came to this planet to study words," Milo began, "and I have learned that you have a word for what happened to me. Victim. You say I was a victim of an accident. You say I am a victim of Sarilith's seduction. You say I am a victim of a law that demands my life." He looked at Sarilith. She was watching him with a fierce, terrifying pride. "But I am not a victim," he said, "and I am not a pawn." He turned to Valerius. "I entered that chamber by accident. That is true, but everything that happened after, every step I took, every risk I accepted was a choice. I chose to stay. I chose to protect her, not because of a law written by dead men, but because I met a living woman who deserved to be seen, not just watched." He looked up at the cameras. "Consent is the only foundation for honor. Without it, your tradition is just a cage. I am not standing here as a prisoner of the Voss line. I am standing here as a partner. And if you want to execute me for that, you will have to look the entire galaxy in the eye and admit that you fear a human who made a choice more than you fear a vampire who follows orders." The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the shift of history. Then Valerius laughed. It was a desperate, ugly sound. "Words." The priest sneered. "Pretty, soft, human words." But the Dominion was not built on words. It was built on blood. Valerius turned to the regent, his eyes manic. "They challenge the tradition? Fine. But the Codex also states that if the law is disputed, the truth must be weighed in the judicium sanguinis." A gasp went through the hall. The reformists stood up, shouting objections. "The ritual duel," Sarilith whispered, her face draining of color. "I invoke the right of combat," Valerius screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Sarilith. "If she is truly the heir, if she is truly worthy of rewriting the statutes of the founders, let her prove her blood is stronger than the tradition she mocks." The regent looked at Sarilith. "The demand is valid," the regent said quietly. "To rewrite the law, you must survive the law. Do you accept?" Milo grabbed Sarilith's arm. "No. You are exhausted. You used too much energy at the cathedral." "I have no choice," Sarilith said, her eyes hard. "If I refuse, I lose the people. They need to see me bleed for this." She stepped forward. "I accept," she declared. "Then face your judgment," Valerius roared. The floor of the grand court began to rumble. The center tiles retracted, revealing a fighting pit of raw, jagged iron. From the Vex antechamber, a figure emerged. It was a monster. It stood 7 feet tall, clad in heavy hydraulic plate armor. But it was the flesh beneath the armor that made Milo recoil. The creature's skin was translucent, and beneath it, the veins glowed with a violent, radioactive red light. It pulsed with a power that felt sickeningly familiar. It was a Velithari champion, but one that had been twisted, pumped full of chemical stimulants and something else. Milo stared at the glowing veins. He recognized the hue. It was the exact shade of Saralith's eyes during the rite. Stolen blood, Milo realized with a jolt of nausea. They didn't just try to kill her with the toxin. They harvested the energy from the samples they took. They pumped this gladiator full of her own genetic power. Saralith saw it too. She froze, a flicker of horror crossing her face. "He carries my curse," she whispered. Milo stepped up to the edge of the pit. "I am staying with her." "It is a single combat," Valerius shouted. "The Codex says the witness stands as the shield," Milo shouted back, citing the text he had just plugged into the tower. "I am part of this bond. If she fights, we fight." The regent nodded. "Allow it. Let the human die with her." Saralith looked at Milo. "You cannot fight this thing. Milo, it will tear you apart." "I'm not going to fight it with my fists," Milo said, tapping the side of his head. "I'm going to watch it. Just keep it busy." The gong sounded. The fight was a blur of violence that the human eye could barely track. The champion moved with impossible speed, a red streak of kinetic force. Saralith met him in midair, her own power flaring to match him. The impact sent a shockwave through the stadium that shattered the remaining windows. But Saralith was tired. She had spent days running, fighting, and keeping Milo alive. The champion was fresh, and he was fueled by a synthetic overdose of her own potential. He struck her with a gauntleted fist, sending her crashing into the iron wall of the pit. She slumped, coughing blood. "Saralith!" Milo yelled. The champion turned on Milo. The glowing red eyes behind the helmet were mindless, devoid of anything but rage. He raised a massive sword, the blade humming with plasma. Milo didn't run. He stood his ground, his eyes locked not on the sword but on the champion's armor. He watched the way the creature moved. He watched the pulsing of the red veins. Linguistics, Milo thought frantically. Syntax, pattern, everything has a grammar. The champion lunged. Saralith intercepted the blow, catching the sword with her bare hands, her skin sizzling as she held the plasma blade back. She screamed with effort, her knees buckling. Milo watched the champion's neck. There, just above the collar of the armor, a rhythmic stutter in the pulse of the veins. Badum. Click. Badum. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was a regulator. The champion wasn't biologically integrating the blood. He was using a pump, a mechanical interface to force the stolen high blood into his system. Milo saw the insignia on the pump valve. It was tiny, but under the harsh arena lights, it was visible. Obsidian Fu, the human corporation. Saralith was losing. The champion was forcing the blade down, inches from her neck. "Stop!" Milo screamed. His voice wasn't terrified anymore. It was authoritative. It was the voice of a man who had found the typo in a contract that invalidated the whole deal. He pointed at the champion. "I invoke the clause of purity." The crowd went silent. Even the champion hesitated, confused by the sudden shout. Valerius looked down. "There is no such clause." "There is!" Milo shouted, reciting the law he had memorized in the cathedral. "The duel proves the worth of the blood. If the challenger brings false blood, or blood sustained by the artifice of the machine, they are forsaken." He turned to the cameras. Look at his neck. He isn't a warrior. He is a fuel tank. He is using human technology to pump stolen blood. Milo looked at the regent. Scan him. If I am wrong, execute me. But if I am right, this duel is a fraud and House Vex has committed heresy in the sacred pit. The regent stood up. Pause the combat, the regent commanded. Scan the challenger. No! Valerius shrieked. Kill them! The champion roared and pushed the blade down. Saralith's arms trembled, her strength failing. Milo didn't wait for the scan. He grabbed the sidearm he had holstered, the one with 2 shots left. He didn't aim at the champion's head. He aimed at the glowing valve on the neck. Syntax, Milo thought. Break the sentence structure. He fired. The shot was perfect. The kinetic round shattered the regulator valve. The effect was catastrophic. The pressurized, stolen blood, no longer regulated by the pump, surged into the champion's system all at once. The creature convulsed. The red glow in his veins turned blinding white. He screamed, a sound of pure biological overload, and then collapsed, his body seizing as the incompatible energy tore his cellular structure apart. He fell backward, the sword clattering to the floor. Saralith slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The champion lay twitching, the broken pump sparking and leaking neon-red fluid. The logo of Obsidian 4 was clearly visible on the wreckage. Milo jumped into the pit and ran to Saralith. He pulled her up, wrapping his arms around her. Are you okay? He asked, his voice shaking. I am alive, she wheezed, leaning her weight on him. Because of you. Again. Milo looked up at the regent. The machine is exposed, Milo said. The duel is invalid. The regent looked at the twitching body of the champion, then at the pale, horrified faces of the Vex nobles. He looked at Valerius, who was trying to back away into the shadows. The verdict is rendered, the regent announced. His voice was cold iron. House Vex has used illicit technology to corrupt the right of combat. They are stripped of rank. High Justiciar Valerius is under arrest for treason against the blood. The guards moved. This time, there was no hesitation. They seized the priests. They dragged the Vex nobles from their box. Director Koval stood up in the human box. He looked at the carnage, then at Milo and Saralith standing together in the pit. He realized which way the wind was blowing. The United Earth Coalition condemns the actions of Obsidian 4, Koval announced, his voice trembling slightly. We withdraw our threats of isolation. We stand ready to support the reforms. It was over. The conspiracy had collapsed under the weight of its own complexity. 3 days later, the Grand Court met again. The atmosphere was different. The fear was gone, replaced by a cautious, fragile hope. The vote was unanimous. The blood law was amended. The new text was read aloud by the new High Justiciar, a reformist from the scholar caste. The witnessing of the vulnerability shall no longer mandate death or binding. It shall trigger the covenant of choice. Both parties shall be offered protection, and any union formed must be proven to be free of coercion, confirmed by neutral counsel. Saralith stood before the throne. She wore a simple gown of gray silk, her hair loose. She looked younger, lighter. The regent held out the scepter of the night. You have proven your blood. Lady Voss, the regent said. The throne is yours by right of lineage and by right of victory. Saralith looked at the scepter. She looked at the empty throne that loomed above them, dark and isolating. Then she looked at Milo, who was standing in the front row of the gallery wearing a suit that actually fit him. I accept the right, Saralith said clearly, but I delay the claim. A murmur went through the crowd. The Dominion does not need a queen right now, she continued. It needs to heal. If I take the throne today, I am a conqueror. I wish to earn it as a reformer. I will lead the Council of Transition. I will oversee the dismantling of the blood tech trade, and when the laws are stable, then I will ascend. The regent nodded, a faint smile touching his ancient lips. Wisdom, he murmured. You are indeed your father's daughter. Sarilith turned and walked away from the throne. She walked straight to Milo. The court watched them. There was no judgment now. Only awe. They walked out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The suns were setting, casting the capital in a twin twilight of violet and gold. The lanterns were gone, replaced by the natural starlight. So, Milo said, leaning against the railing, you turned down being Empress of the Galaxy? Delayed, Sarilith corrected, leaning next to him. Not turned down. I have a lot of paperwork to do first. Milo laughed, and here I thought I was done with bureaucracy. Sarilith turned to him. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. The blood mirroring hummed between them, a warm, steady resonance that felt like coming home. We have to do one more thing, she said. What? The public wedding, she said. Milo blinked. I thought we just rewrote the law so we didn't have to get married. We did, Sarilith said. We destroyed the obligation. She stepped closer, her red eyes soft and luminous. But the people need to see that the new law works. They need to see that a human and a highborn can choose each other. Not because of a mistake. Not because of a statute. But because they want to. She paused, looking down at his hand. And I want to. Milo felt his heart do a slow, heavy thud in his chest. You want to marry the clumsy linguist who almost got you killed 3 times? I want to marry the man who stood in a pit of monsters and quoted grammar at them, she said. I want to marry the man who taught me that my power doesn't have to be a weapon. She looked up at him. You were never my punishment, Milo. You were the only thing that felt real in a world of ghosts. You proved to me that power can be gentle. Milo reached up and touched her face. He traced the line of her jaw, the sharpness that had once terrified him. And you, he said softly, took the biggest mistake of my life and turned it into the bravest thing I've ever done. I never thought I deserved a love this big. Sarilith, I never thought I was the hero type. You are not a hero, she whispered, leaning in. You are a partner. That is better. She kissed him. It wasn't like the desperate kiss in the cathedral. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a seal on a contract that had no expiration date. It was a promise made not to a government, but to each other. Below them, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one. The warships were gone. The blockade was lifted. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the world in a darkness that was no longer terrifying, but peaceful. Milo pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. So, he said, a public wedding. Does this mean I have to wear the dusk armor again? Because it really chafes. Sarilith laughed, a sound that rang clear and bright in the night air. No armor, she promised. Just you. That is all I ever required. They stood there for a long time, watching the stars come out over a world they had saved. They knew there would be challenges ahead. There would be politics, and trade disputes, and cultural friction. But they also knew that traditions were not stone idols to be worshipped. They were shelters to be built and rebuilt, designed to protect the living, not the dead. And they knew that love, even love that begins as a terrifying twist of fate, can become the ultimate freedom, as long as you keep choosing it, day after day, against the odds. Ready? Sarilith asked, looking back toward the hall where the galaxy was waiting for them. Milo smiled, squeezing her hand. Ready. They walked back inside, together, to begin the rest of their lives.